when you have the stroke and you go through all of that emotional energy, all those ups and downs, the grief, the sadness, betrayal, depression, all of those energies can also become trapped in the body. And one of the fascinating things that we found about this, Bill, is that when you develop a trapped emotion, that trapped emotion is more likely to go into an area and lodge in an area where there is some kind of pre-existing weakness or injury. So it's very likely for most people, most of the time, what happens is when they have a stroke and they are experiencing all those emotions, those emotional energies will tend to lodge more often than not in that area where the stroke occurred, thereby distorting that energy field in that area even more than it already is, and making it more difficult to recover, you see.
This is the Recovery After Stroke podcast with Bill Gasiamis, helping you navigate recovery after stroke.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Recovery After Stroke podcast. Recently, Spotify released a new feature which allows you to now rate your favorite show in the same way the Apple Podcast app allows it. So if you think the show deserves it, I'd love it if you left us a 5-star review. This will help the show rank better on search engines and help newly diagnosed stroke survivors find the show easier, and it could make a massive difference in their recovery. So go to your favorite podcast app, whether it's the Apple Podcast app or Spotify or any of the other podcast apps, and share what the podcast means for you. It will really make a huge difference to how other people find the show, and hopefully it'll help support them on their stroke recovery. Now, this is episode 191, and my guest today is Dr. Bradley Nelson, who started his career as a chiropractor and in 2007 published the book, The Emotion Code, which has the foreword written by Tony Robbins. In our conversation, amongst other things, we discussed how emotional baggage from the past is getting in the way of your stroke recovery and how dealing with negative emotions can improve your life and support your recovery. Dr. Bradley Nelson, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Bill. It's great to be here.
Just to give you a bit of background on me, I'm a stroke survivor. My first episode with a hemorrhagic stroke was in February of 2012. I had another one in March of 2012, and then I had another one in November of 2014. I had brain surgery. I had to learn how to walk again. I had to get my memory back. I had a whole bunch of things that I had to go through, which is very common for a lot of stroke survivors. But somewhere I got lucky, and I found that one of the things that improved my recovery more than anything was connecting with my heart. And probably for the first time in my 37 years, I actually found there was a heart in my chest. Like, I felt it for the first time. I noticed it was there. I didn't know what I was feeling or noticing, and it was very strange to me. Now, there is evidence that I had been warm and loving and caring and all those things to my family and to my wife and to my children, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I wasn't consciously aware that I was doing that. And 10 years on from that first incident, and about 200 podcasts later, we're fast approaching 200, I think I've concluded that the one major thing missing in stroke recovery is the emotional recovery. And I'll tell you why I say that. I say that because when we have a stroke and people discover that some of our limbs don't work properly, they immediately put us into the physical recovery. If you're lucky, you'll get somebody come to your ward and have a bit of a counseling session with you and kind of go through the little mental recovery, the beginnings of a mental recovery. But nobody comes in to talk to you ever. And do you ever get any suggestion that there's an emotional recovery that needs to occur? And when I ask the nearly 5,000 people that follow me on Instagram about which part, when I give them the choice, psychological, emotional, physical, when I give them the choice about which part of themselves they're neglecting in their recovery, very often they come back and say the emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Now you know why I needed to reach out to you. Tell me a little bit about what you do.
Well, I practice as a holistic chiropractic physician for about 20 years in one form or another. And what I found was that all of my patients had something in common. No matter how old or how young they were, no matter whether they were male or female, whether they were suffering from mental issues, emotional issues, depression, anxiety, phobias, panic attacks, PTSD, eating disorders, or whether they were dealing with some kind of a named disease process, or whether they were dealing with some kind of physical pain. What I found was they all had something in common. And what that thing was that they had in common was what I came to call their emotional baggage. And it took me a long time to figure this out, but I spent a lot of years trying to understand how our bodies really work and what's really going on with our bodies. And I actually, I made it a matter of prayer, really. Every person that came in to see me, before I would go to work with them, I would just take a moment, and it was a momentary pause, really. Nobody ever knew that I was doing this. It was a totally private, totally personal habit, but I would ask for help from, the higher power. And, we all have different names for the higher power. If we believe in a higher power, we all believe different things, and that's fine. But I mean, I found that answers came, sometimes suddenly, sometimes in a huge download of information. That was rare. Usually the information would just kind of gradually come little bit by little bit, over the years. So what I came to understand, and this, having a stroke and suffering from the after effects of a stroke is such a concrete, such a physical thing. The emotional side of it, to understand the emotional side of it, you have to step away from the physical a little bit for a moment. And you have to start to understand a little bit about what our bodies really are made of. And what they're really made of is energy. I mean, if you look at your hand, your hand looks pretty solid. But if you were to magnify your hand with a big enough microscope, if you magnify it about 850,000 times under a microscope, you might be looking at a strand of DNA. And that looks nothing like your hand, but it is your hand still. And if you were to continue to zoom in somewhere over 1 million power magnification, you might be looking face to face with a single individual atom. And if you could look inside that atom, you see there's really nothing in there. It's just empty space. It's just pure energy with some other little energies that are zipping around at the speed of light. And that's really what we are. We're beings of pure energy. And so, quantum physicists like Albert Einstein have been trying to tell us this and trying to help us understand these ideas, these abstract concepts of what our reality really is for over 100 years now. But what I found was that when my patients would go through some kind of an intense emotional experience, oftentimes they would end up with emotional energy that was trapped in their body. And that's really what our emotional baggage really actually is. And so I found that I've developed a way to find and remove this emotional baggage, and that's what the emotion code actually is. And by finding and removing that emotional baggage, all kinds of things improve. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One reason is because when you have a trapped emotion, that emotional energy is like a ball of pure energy, if you can imagine. And again, what we're talking about here is we're talking about the body in terms of quantum physics. Now, this is the science of the new age, the new millennium. I mean, many scientists and prominent doctors have said for the last 30 years, the future of healing, the future of medicine is energy. It's energy medicine. It's energy healing. And they're absolutely right, because to understand what our bodies really are gives us the basis to really work with our bodies and help our bodies in these ways that can be very profound, really.
What-
So
I was going to
yeah.
interrupt there for a moment and say one of the most interesting things that I've done is I've been to a functional medicine doctor who did a finger prick, got some blood, and put it under a microscope while I was there in the room with them. And I got to see how my blood behaved differently every time I went there, and how quickly the cells were moving around differently every time I went there. And one of the things that was quite interesting was how I could see the impact of my habits in that particular morning on the way to that appointment impacted the way my blood looked and the way it behaved. And one of the classics was being dehydrated the night before, not having enough water in the morning, and getting there and seeing the cells being very sluggish. And then being consciously aware of that after I'd seen that video, and then making sure that I did a good job the next time I went and drank plenty of water to see how my blood would behave differently. And then like that, you get a clear vision of how we're impacting our own well-being or our own blood at this stage. Let's not take it to the deeper level, because I wasn't that progressed with my awareness yet. And that gives a sense of power. That gives a sense of this is interesting information. I wonder what I could do with it.
Right, absolutely. Well, you know, we're on the verge of stepping into a whole new era of how we are going to be taking care of ourselves. And the way that the emotion code works, essentially, well, let me share a story with you. Actually, let me read you a story that came from someone in the UK. She said, "I just want to give a huge thank you to Dr. Bradley Nelson and share this story. My father has gone from about to die or survive as a cabbage after having a major stroke to back to normal." She said, "I worked back to back along with many other fellow body code and emotion code practitioners." Those are people that have been trained in the work that we do, "to save my father. I prayed that if he didn't return as a man, then we let him go. This was the hardest thing to do. Yet he walks, talks, and even wanted to get a train to go to a family funeral. I'm amazed. This happens all the time. I never fail to be amazed. I'm eternally grateful and so blessed to have met you and trained with you. This remarkable life-saving and life-changing energy practice works. It's energy, and energy is where it's at. It's the future. He is not only recovering quickly, but has gone from not believing in my work to being a believer." She's one of our practitioners, actually. Her name is Beth Foley, as have the rest of my family. Thank you, Dr. Brad, and everyone who supports you and all the fellow practitioners. I do believe in miracles. Now, think about this. What happens, these physical bodies of ours are also really energy. In fact, some quantum physicists recently, just to make a point, said recently that if you could take all the empty space out of everyone's body on Earth, you could actually fit all 7.8 billion people in the world into a box the size of a sugar cube. Because these bodies of ours really are energy fields. And so this physical state that we're in is really, it's more of a force field than anything else. Well, let me share some stories with you. One that comes to mind, just to help illustrate how this stuff works. This man came in to see me many years ago. His back pain was a 9 on a 0 to 10 scale. And I tested him using the emotion code and found that he had a trapped emotion, and the emotion was anger. Now, the subconscious mind knows these answers. The conscious mind knows very, very little, but the subconscious mind is that part of us that's digesting our food and keeping our blood cells multiplying and so on, and doing all of those things automatically. And so we have a way to tap into that in the emotion code. And so I found that this emotion, this trapped emotion, this ball of energy, literally a ball of anger, if you can imagine that, was causing this guy's pain. And it had actually gotten stuck in his body about 20 years before. And when I arrived at that, he immediately spoke up and he said, well, I know what that's about. And he told me that it was a work situation. He'd been falsely accused of something at work, and he was really upset, very angry about it. That energy became trapped in his body. Ultimately, he was able to get all of that resolved, but nevertheless, he still had this energy in his body. Now, 20 years later, that emotional extreme that he went through was manifesting as physical pain for him, and severe. On a 0 to 10 scale, he was a 9. So just 1 point away, 1 step away from going into the hospital, Anyway, so I released that trapped emotion of anger from him, and the pain went from a 9 to a 0 instantly. Now, what you need to understand, and there's more to this story, but the reason why that happened is because, you see, when you have a trapped emotion, it's a ball of energy, in this case, a ball of anger in his low back, and it was constantly distorting the energy field that was making up his body in that area. So all the chemical reactions in that area were all affected. The blood flow, the lymph flow, the flow of acupuncture energy in that area, all of those things were being distorted to some degree. So eventually he's got this terrible pain. And when we released that trapped emotion, the pain went from a 9 to a 0, boom, just that fast. Well, the interesting thing about this is that, and this is why this is such a great illustration. A couple of days later, he came back in to see me, and he said, Dr. Nelson, my back pain is still gone. He said, I still can't quite believe it. But he said, when I came in here, I had another problem that I didn't tell you about. He said, for as long as I can remember, I've basically been what you'd call a rageaholic. He said, I'm always yelling at my wife and my kids. I've got to watch the road rage. I've been to anger management several times, hasn't really helped me. But he said, since you released that trapped emotion of anger from me, I don't feel that way anymore. I just feel kind of peaceful and relaxed. He said, how did that work? And at the time I said, well, I'm not really sure. But now understand that in this guy's case, he had this ball of anger, okay? And it was causing this physical pain because of the distorting effect it was having on his energy field and thereby his physical body. But when we released that energy, suddenly he didn't feel as angry anymore. Why? Because you see, before we released that energy, when a situation would come along in his life where he might tend to feel the emotion of anger, he would feel that emotion. He'd fall into that frequency, that vibration much more easily, much more readily than he otherwise would have, because part of his body was feeling that emotion 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Of course.
So one of the things you have to understand with these trapped emotions, and we all have these, and the average person has probably 200 or 300 of these if they're an adult. Not all the emotional experiences that we go through in our lives leave us with emotional baggage, but some do. And so what these things do is they distort the normal energy field of the body, and so they weaken the body and they interfere with the body's function in that area. Now, imagine having several of those trapped emotions in your brain, affecting your brain. Is that going to help the brain function better, or is it not going to function as well? Is it going to be more prone to weaknesses and vessels and things like that? And I think the answer clearly is yes, because we're beings made of energy. So anyway, that gives you a little bit of a glimpse into how this works. But also, so in other words, trapped emotions, I believe, in my experience, can be a precursor or an underlying contributing factor to um, stroke, but also
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
when you have the stroke and you go through all of that emotional energy, all those ups and downs, the grief, the sadness, betrayal, depression, all of those energies can also become trapped in the body. And one of the fascinating things that we found about this, Bill, is that when you develop a trapped emotion, that trapped emotion is more likely to go into an area and lodge in an area where there is some kind of pre-existing weakness or injury. So it's very likely for most people, most of the time, what happens is when they have a stroke and they are experiencing all those emotions, those emotional energies will tend to lodge more often than not in that area where the stroke occurred, thereby distorting that energy field in that area even more than it already is, and making it more difficult to recover, you see, and prolonging the recovery and the healing time in that area. So this is one of the things that happens.
I was gonna say, like, I love the way that you describe it, because you've got a lot of words to describe the way emotions play a role in our health and well-being, or the opposite of our health and well-being. And I relate to a lot of the stuff that you said. So I believe, and a lot of stroke survivors I've interviewed believe, that they've also created the perfect storm around the weakness in their body or in their head, especially in the form of a hemorrhage. For me, I created the perfect storm around that blood vessel to pop. I created the relevant necessary emotions, the relevant stress, the relevant all the things that do come together to create a big emotional outburst. I used to behave inappropriately, yell and scream all the time. I used to blame everybody else for all my problems. I used to think there was no solutions to all my problems. And I never really had many problems until I had the stroke. Then I had a real new set of problems that I actually had no skills or idea how to solve. Mm-hmm. So I became consciously aware that I was very much responsible for, there was a part that I played in this blood vessel bursting. It was a blood vessel that is known to burst. I was born with this blood vessel, and it's a faulty blood vessel. It's called an arteriovenous malformation. And for some people, they never burst. For some people, they do. And I got to that point where it burst. So when I discovered, when I started to listen to some words that I used to use to describe myself, it makes sense that something happened in my head. So I used to call myself a head case. And that's never a pleasant thing to call somebody or yourself. A head case suggests that you do a lot of your life happens in your head. When I started screaming, when I had a screaming match with somebody, which of course I needed to make sure that I would win, I used to get so intense, my eyeballs would be almost popping out of my head. My blood vessels would all be just expanded on my forehead. And then I would have this massive headache for hours afterwards. I imagine the blood pressure went through the roof. Everything was going wrong. So simultaneously to that, I was this guy that could be very loving and very caring and the rest of it. And when I was lacking resources, and I don't know what they were right now, I don't know what they were for me to get to that point. Well, actually, I do know what it was. I believe the resources I was lacking, I was just oblivious to my body. Really, I had no idea.
Mhm.
And I think fear was behind a lot of the anger and the stress and the frustration that I used to manifest. But when I unlocked this thing in my chest, when I discovered that,
Mhm.
then it became apparent to me that one of the major things that I needed to work on was my anger, and resolve the anger and do whatever the work that was necessary to resolve the anger. So it's not like the anger just went away, but discovering my heart, my chest made it possible for me to realize, to have that realization that now that I have discovered my heart and now that I'm noticing all these amazing feelings and connecting better with people, anger is probably a trait or a behavior that is not going to serve me well going forward, because it's going to interfere with this new discovery that I've had, this emotion, and this different level of connecting with family and friends. And that became really important because they were responding to me really well. And maybe I had the upper hand because I just had a stroke and they were feeling sorry for me anyway. But the whole cycle just started to blossom into this amazing thing. And then I started to have these conscious awarenesses of all the things that I was doing to interfere negatively in my life, to impact my life negatively. And then I just sort of started ticking them off one by one. You know, nutrition, work hours, relationships. I went to counseling, all these different things, and things started to improve. Now the stroke was still there; it was still with me every day. I still wasn't allowed to work. I wasn't allowed to drive at times. There was still all these other issues, but I was having one of the best experiences of my life I've ever had. And I often say that stroke was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Mhm.
So
I get that.
I can really relate to what you're saying.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. My father had an aneurysm, and it happened right after um, something kind of traumatic happened with my mom. And they'd been married for, I don't know, 60 years around that at that point. And I think that I really think that that precipitated his aneurysm. And I think that um, there are emotional things that happen to us, emotional events, and we can. Um, Life is so interesting. There are often metaphysical causes of things, and where things happen for us to learn from sometimes, and sometimes we're on the wrong track, and sometimes things like this can really be a blessing. So it's really interesting. And you mentioned about the heart, and one of the fascinating things about the heart is that some scientists not too long ago did a study, and they were looking at the brain, the nerve conduction between the brain and the heart, measuring those messages going from the brain to the heart. And they were expecting that they would see the bulk of the messages traveling from the brain to the heart. And they found just the exact opposite. And this is in normal healthy individuals. They found that most of the messages, the bulk of those messages, are traveling from the heart to the brain. Now that was interesting, and that goes along with the discovery of the little brain in the heart. The heart has gray matter and white matter in it. There's a little brain there in the
The heart
heart,
brain. Yep.
and the heart contains the memories of things that we really love, our true affinities. And that's why back in the 1960s, when doctors started doing heart transplants, it didn't take long before patients would come back and relate these strange things. They would talk about how their taste in music or food or sports had totally changed to something else. And they'd find out that sometimes their handwriting would totally change. Sometimes they would have memories of being in places that they never in their lives had ever visited. And in every case, and there are books written about this, in every case when these people were connected with the family of the heart donor, they'd find out, oh yes, that's our son's handwriting that you have now. How strange is that? Or yes, our daughter loved baseball and played it all the time, and now you love baseball too, but you didn't care for it before. Or our son was a concert violinist, and so you didn't used to like classical, but now you do. And those passages that you play over and over and over, those were his favorite passages. There was an amazing story about a 9-year-old girl who received a heart from another young girl who had actually been murdered. And after she recovered, she started having nightmares about being killed herself. Well, she was seeing the murder of the heart donor, this other little girl, and her descriptions from her nightmares of the killer and the murder weapon and everything else, and she was able to describe to the police everything about this guy, what he was wearing. All of that helped lead to the arrest and conviction of the killer of the donor. Now think about that. So, the ancient peoples believed that the heart was the seat of the soul and the source of creativity and the source of love and romance and really the core of our being. And, in the modern world, in modern medicine and biology, we never really paid any attention to those ancient ideas. But those ancient ideas they've permeated the whole world. I mean, it doesn't make too much difference where you live in the world. If someone wants to give you some kind of a romantic gift, it's probably going to end up being in the shape of a heart, or very likely, right? Because those ideas have been around since time out of mind. Well, in the Bible, for example, the word heart is mentioned just shy of 1,000 times. And there are writings in the Bible that say that, God doesn't look on the outward appearance of a person, but he looks on the heart. And that as a person thinks in their heart, so they will be. The ancient Egyptians believed that when we die, we go through a ceremony on the other side where our heart is weighed on a scale against a feather. And if our heart is lighter than a feather, then we go to the good place. But if our heart is heavier than a feather, indicating we've maybe made some bad choices and so on.
Wow.
Yeah, then we go
What
to
an
the
analogy.
underworld.
That's a
Yeah,
lovely analogy. Having a heart that's light as a feather, that means it has no emotional baggage. That means
Yeah.
it's just loving and it's nurturing and it's connecting with other people and it's serving you really, really well. And you're probably serving it really, really well. And it says a lot about you if you have a heart that is light as a feather. That is just such a beautiful analogy.
Yeah, isn't that great? My wife and I went to Egypt, and we had just seen the pyramids, and we were coming back in Cairo, and we stopped at this little shop where it was a papyrus shop. And as we walked in, there was a guy explaining this hieroglyphic panel that is this story of this man who dies, and he goes through the whole situation, and eventually ends up. It turns out his heart is lighter than a feather. And there's a scale there, and these different gods, Horus and Osiris, and so on. Fascinating. So I have one of those at home. I had to buy it because I'd been telling the story for years. But anyway, it's really interesting. So the heart, you see, really truly is a second brain. And in many ways, it's really the first brain. It's the most important brain. But in the world that we live in now, we're living from the brain that's in our heads primarily. And that's why here it is 2022, and we're still using, war to settle differences between nations, and feeling that it's perfectly okay to attack people from drones and kill people, even citizens of our own country. And, a lot of insanity in the world still, because this brain feels nothing. This is where we feel. And that's why if you're really feeling hurt, or if you're really deeply grieved about something, you'll feel it here. You won't feel it in your head. It won't give you a headache. it'll give you this feeling that we call heartbreak or
Mm-hmm.
heartache, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when that's happening to us, um, our heart is under assault. And so what will happen is under those circumstances, the subconscious mind will start to put up a wall around that heart. And that wall is an energy wall that's invisible, but it's made from layers of our emotional baggage. And so the reason why the subconscious mind creates that wall is to protect the heart so that it's not totally broken. And the problem is, I mean, it's great in the short term because you don't want your heart to break, because the heart really is the core of your being, and it's who you really are, the core of who you really are. But the problem is when you have that wall that's been put up, now it's much more difficult for you to really connect with other people. They've done studies actually in labs where they found that if one person's feeling love or affection for another person, their heartbeat will become measurable in that other person's brain waves. So there's this communication going on from heart to heart between all of us all the time. When you've got a heart wall, it's much more difficult for that energy of love to get out, much more difficult for that energy of love to get in. People, when they've got a heart wall, it's much more likely for them to remain single for years and years and years. When the wall's taken down, love shows up in people's lives very often. Even people at advanced ages who never had even been in a relationship before suddenly find themselves in love. Creative ideas also start to flow for people spontaneously, because the best creative ideas you'll ever have will not come from this brain, they'll come from this brain that is in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
Now, think about this in terms of your situation and what you went through, and this profound learning that it's so wonderful, Bill, that you are sharing this with the world, that that this needed to happen for you, and what a transformation, right? I believe we're headed for a world where we're all going to be living from our heart. And I think that that's what all the great teachers, all the great spiritual teachers were really trying to teach us, is to learn how to operate from this space, from the heart space, from the heart brain. And the heart brain communicates in love. And so unconditional love is such a powerful thing. And but think about it. I mean, before you were stuck in your head and you would verbalize that, right?
Correct.
You'd say that.
I not only did I say that, my language really helped support me staying the way that I was before. So when I had the stroke and I couldn't actually access my head because it was offline, because there was a blood clot the size of a golf ball in there,
Wow.
I couldn't access those patterns of behavior and words, and I couldn't say those things. And that's where the neuronal patterns in my body started to get all messed up, amongst other things. You know, the doctors messed about in there and touched it and did all these things. So that helped. But early on, it was the fact that I just couldn't access my head to think at all. And that meant that my heart kind of kicked in and took over to help guide me through the rest of my day, because it wouldn't work any other way. So I was crying a lot. And of course, when you see a male cry, most people get uncomfortable with it. It's not the common thing. People were telling me to stop crying, and I'm telling them, nah, I'm good. Like I need to cry. I'm loving this. It's coming out. It's a bit weird and strange, and you're acting all weird and strange, but I don't have a problem with crying. And I would cry in public. I would cry in on stage. I would cry at supposedly the most inappropriate places for other people. It was inappropriate. So now I was discovering this thing. I couldn't think. I was less of a head case. I felt less pressure in my head. I felt lighter on my shoulders. Everyone that was connecting with me couldn't believe that I was unwell, because the energy that I was putting out was completely different to somebody who was unwell, even though I couldn't finish sentences and remember who came to visit me and all those things. And I just had this profound experience and started to look into it, and then realized all the things that you said. The heart is a brain. It's starting to be referred that way. There's books being written about that. It has neurons, within it about 130,000 neurons. People that are young at heart have 130,000 or more. People that are cold-hearted have 20,000 or less. So when you use words to describe a relationship breakup, and I've never done this because I never had the words back then when I got supposedly brokenhearted, and my wife is a lovely lady. She's been with me for 26 years and she's putting up with all of my stuff. So I've never said I have a broken heart and I'm never going to let anyone break my heart again. And I haven't built that wall. So there was always an opportunity for the right time, the right process, the right kind of path for somebody to get in there and find a way to get in there. There was always that opportunity. I had never built an impenetrable wall, but I know people who I've coached through their own traumas over the last 12 or 13 years who have said stuff like, that person broke my heart. Mm-hmm. And it's so painful that I'm not going to let somebody else break my heart ever again. And I'm never going to have another relationship. Why risk it? And it's like, wow, okay, that's pretty intense, because what they're not realizing is that they're saying those words in an intense moment when it happened, but the repercussions of that means that they've locked that in potentially for 20, 30 or 40 years. And the rest of their life is going to be lonely. They're going to be in their head wanting to have a relationship, and their head's going to be saying, my God, we need to see this through, or we need to meet this person, but then something else will interfere. There'll be a disconnect. They won't understand what it is, and they'll end the relationship, or they'll find a reason why it's not right, or they'll start acting out and the other person will leave, which is usually what happens more often. They create they sabotage themselves so the other person makes the decision, and then they can blame the other person for the problem that that has happened in the relationship, and not take responsibility themselves. So you're talking my language. I totally get it. And that is one of the most difficult things to do, is to have a head-based conversation with a human being who has heart challenges. We need to have a heart-to-heart conversation. Mm-hmm. And that means that you need to find a person who you're prepared to be vulnerable with, who's going to have you safe in a safe space, whether it's counseling or coaching or some of the work that you guys do, and allow that wall to be broken down. Now, I'm saying these things, and I'm hoping that people watching and listening have paid attention to what you said so far, and now are looking inward within themselves and wondering whether or not they have used words like that or similar to that have allowed them to disconnect from their heart, and it's just then taken off and made their life a little bit harder, a little bit more difficult to go through every single day. So, and that then brings me back to other things like the inherited emotions. That was something really interesting in your work that I found amazing, that you're talking about it, and there's not a lot of people talking about it. I think one of the first times I might have heard about it was just after, again, I discovered this thing in my chest. And we worked really hard with my wife to create some wealth over the years. And one of the things that I have is a second property that's mortgaged and the rest of it, and it's rented out. And I used to get really stressed when the particular tenants would decide that they didn't want to live there anymore and they wanted to go somewhere else. And I never understood why I used to get so anxious about it and upset and worried about it. And I used to, be on the case of the real estate agent to find somebody new. And I used to tell my wife, oh my God, they're leaving and all this stuff. And it was such a difficult time. Mm-hmm. And then one time I realized I was with my father, and he told me that, oh my God, the tenants that he has in this other investment property that he has purchased, and he's had it for many, many decades now, because he's nearly 80 years old, mm-hmm. are leaving And it's such a problem. And oh my God, and all this kind of stuff. Exactly like me, I was mimicking his behavior, and I was feeling the anxiety and stress that he was feeling. And when I realized that it was his problem, not mine, it just went away. It never happened to me again. And now I look forward to people to say to me, I need to leave the home and go somewhere else so that I can get in and give it some much needed maintenance to get it ready
Sure.
for the next person. And it was just an amazing insight. And again, another release of stress and anxiety that I didn't need in my life. And if I actually had the opportunity to go back into the past and visit my grandparents and ask them about the challenges that they faced, because, for example, my grandparents would have been through the First World War in Greece, the Second World War in Greece, and then soon after, my dad was born near the end of the Second World War. I imagine that those people, my grandparents who I hardly met, would have had lots of emotions about those 30 or 40 years from the early 1900s that they didn't deal with because they had to get on with life, and that they passed down to their children, who then passed them down to me. So
Yep.
how do we support people, to become aware of one of those blockages that they might have through words? How do we support people to become aware of one of those things that they've brought forward from one of their ancestors? And how do we intervene to put them to end? Because I did it, but I didn't do it consciously at the time. I wasn't aware what I was doing, but now I can reflect on it. How do we just get somebody through that?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Um, with the um, with the process that I've developed with the emotion code, uh, the way that we do it is we tap into the subconscious mind in some very concrete ways through muscle testing. You can ask questions of the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind is the part of our mind that's always awake. It even if we go to sleep and our conscious mind shuts off, the subconscious mind never shuts off. It's always running. But that's where all of the information is about, for example, inherited emotional baggage. Um, I'll share a story with you. I was I was feeling one day like I needed to get work done, and I called my daughter, and she was living about 1,000 miles away at the time, and I asked her if she would work on me at a distance. So she agreed that she would, and we hung up the phone. And so she told me later what happened. She started working on me at a distance, and this is something that we teach in the Emotion Code. We explain it in the book. You can learn how to do it in the book. We have certification programs, etc. But anyway, so she's working on me at a distance, and she finds that I inherited some emotional baggage when I was conceived from my father's side. He got it from his mother, and she got it from her mother, and she kept testing this, and it went back generation upon generation, 22 generations back. And the emotion was hopelessness. Now, when my daughter arrived at that, all of a sudden she could feel the presence of someone standing right next to her, and she knew who it was. It was this grandmother from 22 generations back that this emotional energy had overwhelmed at that time. And my daughter could feel the emotions of this woman. She could feel how overwhelmed with gratitude she was that this was being done, but she could also feel how desperate she was to have this emotional energy released from her posterity. She went through something horrifically hopeless, and then that energy kept passing down the line, passing down the line. So my daughter released that, and that's part of the process that we teach, is how to release these energies. And she could feel it released from that grandmother, and she could feel it ripple through all those other generations. Well, I'm sitting at my desk 1,000 miles away. I know my daughter's working on me. And the moment that she released that inherited trapped emotion from me and from my whole line, well, it released from her as well. But it was one of the most profound healing experiences that I've had in my whole life, because I had had all of my waking hours, all my life. I had had this background feeling of hopelessness, very low level, very just part of the background. And in fact, I remember when I was writing the Emotion Code book. This happened about 2 years after the Emotion Code book came out. The Emotion Code book came out in 2007. So if I remember thinking, if somebody would have asked me during the time that I was writing that book to describe in one word how the project felt, without any hesitation, I would have used the word hopeless. I would have said, well, it feels hopeless, but I'm continuing, right? I'm pressing forward, but it feels totally hopeless. That's literally how it felt. And when that energy was released from me and from my whole line, it was the most uncanny thing. All of a sudden, it was like I'd been living next to a factory all my life, where there was a noise coming out of it and suddenly it shut down and the silence was deafening. Suddenly the absence of this feeling of hopelessness that had been there in the background in my mind every waking hour of my whole entire life, suddenly that was gone. And only then did I recognize that it had even been there. And I thought, my gosh, I've had that my whole entire life. Now that's gone. It was really an incredible thing, and profoundly healing for me, but also for my daughter. My daughter is a tremendously talented, I mean, unbelievably gifted uh, painter. She paints, and she's incredible. And within a year after that was released, she had an art showing in Seattle that we flew up for. And it was unbelievable to see all this art pouring out of her. She'd never painted anything before. And I think if that emotion of hopelessness had not been removed from our whole entire line, removed from her, I think that she probably still wouldn't be painting anything. So now you think about your own life, think about your ancestors. What did they go through? Like your ancestors in both of those wars. I mean, there are books that have been written about the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, that these people have different DNA, and their immune systems are much more unstable and they're more prone to disease and so on. And there's only one explanation. The only explanation is what their grandparents lived through that now is manifesting in their bodies. So think about your own life, your own grandparents, your great grandparents. I mean, what did they go through? And what kind of baggage are you carrying in your life now? And the emotion code makes it really easy to find these and identify these and then actually just release them, because they're just energies that are stuck in the body, even though they might be antiques and hundreds of years old sometimes.
Antiques. I love it. That's a lovely way to describe it. They're antiques. They were useful at a time. They served a purpose back then. They don't serve a purpose now. And now they're just something that we're aware of, that they existed once. My lovely wife, one of the things that I've been aware of is, because I'm an outsider to the family when I first get there, right? 26 years ago, is I see how her mother's behavior under certain conditions is what she's mimicking or using or applying to solve a problem in our own home after we were married. And I could see how my wife didn't enjoy being in that situation with her mum, when her mum was applying those kind of behaviors into a situation, yet she wasn't aware that she was doing it herself. Now, of course, I was doing that as well, but I wasn't aware of my own blind spots. But what was really interesting to see was when I described that to my wife and then say to her, right now, you're doing exactly what your mum did, that would trigger her curiosity. That would get her to the point of going, okay, I see how my mum's behavior impacts me in a situation that's similar. And now I'm responding in a similar way to my children in my home.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the conversations that I would have was like, how long do we want these traumas? Before I knew really what I was talking about, how long do we want them to be manifesting in our lives or causing problems in our lives? I think we're doing the same thing to our kids that our parents did to us.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have the resources that we have available. That's where they came from. We're doing the best we can with our resources. But now that I'm aware of it, why don't we try and resolve something or change something or fix it or make it different or stop behaving a certain way that's impacting our kids negatively? Because then I said to my wife, I imagine that her parents were also going through those things and doing similar things because of the environment that they grew up in and the parents before them. Because in Greece, there was a lot of instability for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
only 4 generations back, you're in the early 1800s, and that's when Greece became no longer occupied by the Ottoman Empire, an empire that we talk about like as if it was in the past,
Oh, right.
but it's such a
Not that
recent
long
past.
ago.
And when you're living in a country that's been occupied for 400 years by another empire that doesn't recognize your religion, your ethnicity, and all those things, it's traumatizing. It's a real problem, and it gets passed down. So at some point we intervened and we did that whole, okay, let's do something different, let's change this. And I'm nearly 50 and my wife's just hit 50, and we're both still unlearning a lot of that stuff. We are forever unlearning and growing and discovering ourselves and getting work done so that we don't continue the next however many years we have on the planet uh, living somebody else's emotions and somebody else's experience that we never
Exactly.
met.
Yes, exactly right. And I've often said that we, each of us, we are the product not only of our own emotional experiences and our own emotional baggage, but also that emotional baggage that we received at conception from mom or dad. And I'll share one more story with you about this. I was speaking at this event once. We had about 300 people in the audience, and I asked if someone was in pain, and a woman came up out of the audience, and she hobbled up, limping, and she said that her pain level was a 9 on a 0 to 10 scale with her hip, and it had been like that for a year. And it was so bad that she would have to manually lift her leg up to get in and out of the car. And she'd been to a couple of doctors for it. They couldn't find anything obviously wrong. So I tested her and found an imbalance and corrected that. And the pain level went from a 9 to a 4. The next thing that I found was an inherited trapped emotion of fear that she'd gotten from her father. And as I'm asking questions and getting answers from her body, we use muscle testing to get answers. Yes is strong and no is weak. I tested that her father gave it to her, but he got it from his dad, and he got it from his dad, and he got it from his dad, and it went back 12 generations. And so one of the things that I like to do that might be kind of mind-blowing for people, but I believe that these ancestors of ours they're only dead physically. They're not dead spiritually. The spirit lives on. And so they often, in fact, every time I've ever tried to find out, I've found that these ancestors, the direct line ancestors, will always show up for the release of an emotion like this because it's going to be released from them. So if you can imagine, I'm on this stage with this woman. She's got this inherited trapped emotion of fear. It goes back 12 generations. And of course, the vast majority of those people are dead. She got it from her father, who wasn't at the event, but was still alive, she said. So anyway, I asked, all right, are these ancestors here with us in this room? And her subconscious mind gave us a yes answer. They were here. And so I asked, well, are they floating around in the air like over the audience? No. Are they sitting out there among the audience? No. Are they up here on the stage with us right now? Yes. And that's always how it is. Now, I've never seen one of these, but let me tell you the rest of the story. So anyway, I released the trapped emotion, the inherited trapped emotion, and the pain level went immediately to zero. And so she's walking around and then dancing. And there's a woman that, barely got up to the stage, and she's dancing around, and eventually she goes back and sits down in the audience, and I finish my lecture. And then I went back out into this hall where my staff was, and I sit down with them. And about a minute after I get there, a woman comes up to me and she said, "Listen," she said, "Dr. Nelson, I was in your class there." She said, "I want you to know something." She said, "I'm one of those people that has this gift to be able to see these spirits that other people don't see." She said, "I've had this all my life." She said, "It's kind of been a blessing and it's kind of been a curse." But she said, "I just wanted you to know that when you were describing those grandfathers of hers up there on the stage with you," she said, "I just wanted you to know I could see them. And it was just like you described. But," she said, "there was something else going on that I don't know that you're aware of." She said, "What I saw was surrounding the stage were at least 200 spirits. And it came to me who they were. These were the spirits of this woman's yet to be born descendants that were there rejoicing that they weren't going to have to take on this woman's crippling emotional baggage, that had been released from their line. Otherwise, they were going to, be owners of that as well." And so, it's such a fascinating thing. But we see lots of amazing things happen when we start to work on the body for what it really is. And what it really is energy, and the emotions are such a huge part of that. What I found in practice was that the single biggest common denominator for all my patients was their emotional baggage. And there are other kinds of imbalances as well that we cover in this other system that we call the body code. Let me share a story with you. A woman wrote in named Jacqueline from Washington. She said, "I was working with an older woman who had just had a stroke. She lost complete function of the left side of her body and she was unable to speak. With the help of the body code, after her second session, her speech returned. After her fourth session, she regained full function of the left side of her body." Now, we don't promote this work as a cure for stroke effects or anything like that. But what we're seeing is interesting things. Here's another woman from Germany named Emily. She wrote in, she said, "My dad was taken to the clinic with a suspected stroke. During the conversation with the doctor, his symptoms of hand numbness and hesitant speech disappeared. Just at that moment, I had made an emotion code session with him remotely and released trapped emotions." So she was not with her father, she was somewhere else. 3 days later, the suspected stroke was confirmed on the MRI. He'd had several small strokes, some of them a while before, which is probably why they went unnoticed. And that happens. In the days that followed, I released further trapped emotions from him remotely, again, at a distance. Since then, his behavior changed noticeably to the positive. He'd been like a loner and withdrawn, and now is much more in his inner center, conversing with other people, and is much more relaxed. It sounds kind of like you. My mom says that living with him now has a completely different quality. She is very happy about it. I was allowed to work on her heart wall too. So see, her dad had a heart wall, and 93% of people have this wall around the heart. I'm very grateful to have found this opportunity and to be able to do so much good for others, but also for myself. Thank you very much for sharing this ingenious method. So again, we don't make any guarantees about specific results for anybody, but these are things that people have actually written in about this. And we've got, we have a lot of these different stories about all kinds of different things.
I can relate to them, and they make sense. I mean, I interviewed a lady, Deb Brandon, for episode 178. She was a mathematician professor. She was disconnected from people, even though she was a professor and teaching. And after her stroke, she became more connected. She found her life changed for the positive. She still has the risk of additional bleeds because she has a cavernous angioma condition that's sometimes reoccurring. And
Yeah.
but she still says her life is far better than what it was, and her emotional maturity has improved, and the way that she connects with people and relates to people has improved, and the rest of it. What we're not saying, what we're definitely not saying, is that stroke fixes people, stroke symptoms such as and deficits such as left side paralysis or
Mm.
right side paralysis or spasticity or eye problems or aphasia. We're not saying any of that. We're not saying that this stuff brings back things that have been lost because of stroke, because physical damage in the brain can make something go away forever. Some
Mhm.
of it has only been interfered with because there's inflammation in the brain. And then when the inflammation comes off, that will allow some of those deficits to get better or ease or go away. But I've had an emotional, I'm going to call it a transformation or awakening. All my deficits are there. All my deficits are invisible, but they're all there. It's tightness on the left side. It's numbness. It's a colder left side. It's issues with
Mhm.
my balance. They're all still there, but that
Mm.
doesn't take away from this emotional change and experience that I've had, which has enhanced my life greatly. And I think it was key to my recovery, being able to be described as stroke being the best thing that ever happened to me, because I feel like a completely different version of myself that I never knew existed. And this thing that I experience on my left side, my deficits, are not really front and center of my mind. They're never really the first thing I think of all the time. It's the first thing I notice when I get out of bed, because my left leg touches the ground, and then I have to be aware that my left leg is on the ground so that I can get up properly and not fall. But other
Mhm.
than that, it's not something that impacts my life in a negative way. I never get upset about it or worried about it, or I never compare myself to the old self. I've just, well, I do, but only in the positive way. Like, I only see myself as being a better, wow, the old Bill was a pretty good guy, but cranky and very uneducated and maybe a little bit ignorant of, well, a lot ignorant on a lot of things. And the new Bill's not. So I've compared myself to all those amazing things. So I just want to make sure that people understand that we are not saying that this replaces modern medicine and it is a miracle cure for deficits of stroke, especially after something catastrophic has happened. We're not saying that, but it does support recovery so much. And I can't emphasize it enough. And when I just found you on Instagram, I thought instantly, I've got to have you on here and talk about the work that you do. And then I discovered that you've been doing this since at least 2007, when you wrote the book, The Emotional Code.
Right.
And I would say that you'd be one of the few people that were doing this kind of work that long ago.
Yep. It feels like it's been quite a while now, but it's been a lot of fun, and it's been a tremendous labor of love. And we have we certify people in this method, but this method, the emotion code, is simple enough that anyone can learn how to do it from the book itself. And you can have great results with all kinds of things just using the emotion code yourself. Now, if you want to have someone work with you, we've certified I think almost 9,000 people now in about 80 countries around the world to do this work. And because it's energy work, it means that you don't have to travel. You can have someone on the other side of the planet that can work on you and release emotional baggage and take down that wall around your heart and so on. And that can be done. You might find a great practitioner. The website that we use is called discoverhealing.com.
Mhm.
And there's a map there of our practitioners. You might find that the person that resonates the most with you, maybe they're on the other side of the world, maybe they're in Germany or Singapore or something,
Mhm.
and yet the results are the same as if you're live and in person. And again, you can learn how to do this yourself. So it's optional. You can have someone work with you, and that's great. Or you can learn how to do this, do it yourself, and I highly recommend that you do learn how to do this yourself. I mean, finding a practitioner is great, but ultimately, you're going to want to know how to do this yourself, because it's simple, it's fast, it's easy. Kids learn how to do it. We have kids all over the world doing it successfully. So
I'm not in any way affiliated with you. This is the first time we've met. I'm not making any money out of anything that we do or discuss, but I did skim through the book and I noticed that the forward. So I'm promoting you and the book, but because I think this is important work. That's what I'm trying to say. And I did notice that the forward is written by Tony Robbins.
Right. Yes, Tony Robbins. It was really interesting because he contacted us probably about 5 years ago, I think, and just totally out of the blue, and wanted to meet us and find out what we were doing with the emotion code. He had found out about it, and so they flew my wife and I out to their place in Palm Beach in Florida, and we were able to work with them. And we've been to their home and a number of different times now, and we're still, we stay connected with them. And it was interesting because I was able to share with him how 30 years before, his work had changed our life in a really profound way. And so yeah, he's a good man and has done a lot of good for a lot of people around the world. And it was a great honor for him to write the foreword for the Emotion Code. We've also got some great endorsements from a lot of amazing people, like Joe Dispenza and Greg Braden and some other people that you've probably heard of.
Yeah, I have heard of them. I have heard of them. It's really amazing to discover this, to realize that it was so long ago that you wrote it. I mean, when I say so long ago, in the space of my lifetime, that's quite a chunk away. In 2007, I was completely unaware of any of the challenges that I had manifested, or that were trapped in my body. The rest of it, I was definitely unaware of a stroke looming that was going to happen. So in 2012, only 5 years after you wrote the book, I had the stroke. So my search, if it did uncover this book, I don't think I would have been able to read it. I don't think I would have been ready for it, because I think that these other dramatic things had to happen for me to be in that space where I can accept information like this.
Yeah, probably right.
Yeah, but I got there, and I did Tony Robbins' work back in the early 2000s, I would say. I went to one of his seminars here in Melbourne, in Sydney, in Australia, and I did the 4 days. And that was an interesting thing, because one of the first things that he made us do was do the fire walk, and that was a life-changing experience, because I always reflect back on that time when this, wet behind the ears guy traveled to another state to do 4 days with 5,000 complete strangers. And the first thing we did was something that you can't comprehend, which is walk on fire.
Yeah.
And the fact that I did it, and the fact that I never got burnt, and the fact that all these things have was just sensationally amazing. I suppose what I'm trying to do as we come to the end of this episode is just give people a sense of real dramatic, amazing change is possible and if it's possible for the negative, it's possible for the positive. And we're talking about the positive change. And you're capable of so many things that you didn't think you were capable of. And here's a classic example, Tony Robbins' firework. I shook his hand. His hand was about the size of my hand.
Yeah.
And I remember the whole experience as being probably the beginning of this rediscovery of myself. And it took between the time that I attended his course and the time that I had the stroke, it was probably about 10 or 15 years had passed. And the lessons that were yet to come, I wasn't aware of. But I was on that journey. Sometimes I'm saying is that results from doing this work don't come immediately. Sometimes they come down the track when you're not expecting it. But it's
Right.
as a result of all the work you've always done. Now, let's wrap up by asking you, where can people find out about your work, and where would you like them to visit if they're curious?
Sure. Well, our main website is at discoverhealing.com, and you can read about certification there. You can of course get the book in any bookstore, Amazon. It's available in multiple languages, of course, around the world, and of course we have YouTube channel, and we're on Facebook and so on at Discover Healing, and also drbradleynelson.com is my personal blog site. But a lot of the information there is at Discover Healing. And so you can go there, and right at the top of the page, you can there's a place where you can request it's like an emotional toolkit, and you just put in your information, your email address, and then we'll send you back the first 2 chapters of the book for free. And so you can start reading the book. And if you like the first couple chapters, then of course you can get the book wherever you want. And the book is also available on Amazon, narrated by me, and Tony Robbins narrates the foreword for the book. And it's something that you really need to open your mind to the possibility that what these scientists and physicists have been saying for the last 30 years, that the future is all about energy medicine. This is I believe, the simplest, easiest, most cutting edge method of energy medicine that's available on the planet. Who knew that our emotional baggage was actually the single biggest cause of underlying issues in the body? Emotional baggage can be an underlying weakening factor that I believe can predispose a person to maybe having a stroke. And again, if you have a stroke and you go through all that emotional angst afterward, a lot of that emotional energy may lodge in the area of the stroke again, and may prolong the recovery time, and make things harder, make it harder for you to recover completely. And so anyway, we don't promote the emotion code or any of the work that we do as a cure for anything. But what we're finding is that when we look at the body in a completely different way, through a completely different lens, when we look at the body through this lens of quantum physics and the energy world, when we look at the body for what it really truly is, which is just this very complex energy field, we find that emotional baggage is this huge component of all kinds of things. And when you start removing that emotional baggage, which the emotion code makes easy, pretty soon you become a believer, because you see what's happening. You see pain go away. You see all kinds of things improve and change. And so I would just really urge all of you listening to just be open-minded to the possibility that maybe this is real, because it is.
Yes, suspend your disbelief for a little while, and allow yourself to experience something different. I'm in the process of writing my book, and I related to your hopelessness story, but it's not hopeless for me. It's just a timing thing for me. And the chapters, chapter 1 is about mindset, and chapter 2 is about emotional intelligence in the heart brain. Then there is a section in chapter 2 that says, I know chapter 2 is emotional intelligence and the heart brain. I would rather it be chapter 1, but you're probably in your head, and it's probably difficult for me to move you to your heart at the beginning of this whole conversation. So let me convince you at the head level with chapter 1, and now let's talk about what I consider to be the most important part of recovery, which is the emotional part. Because if you deal with that, then everything else, there's space for everything else to be dealt with, like the physical side of it, and all of the things that you have to readjust to in life, and all the things that you have to learn about yourself, and all the problems that you're going to face. there's more than one way to have a stroke. There's so many ways to have a stroke, and I'm speaking about a hemorrhagic stroke, which was as a result of a bleed. But it is 100% known that strokes that are caused by for ischemic strokes and strokes that are caused by blood clots, etc., and even strokes that are hemorrhagic, it's known that we can negatively interfere in our vessel health and cause hemorrhages by high blood pressure and not managing that, by high blood sugar, by all these things. So I concur 100%. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm going to have show notes to everybody for all of your socials and links so that everybody can go there. And fantastic. Great that I've met you. Lovely that you're doing the work that you're doing, and you've been doing it for so long. It's such a relief knowing that somebody's been doing this for quite a long time. And now I think what's going to happen is the fact that we have access to all of these different ways to find people like you is going to make it a lot easier for a lot of other people who are going through some serious health condition to get information quickly, whereas I struggled to find information. 2012 was still quite some time that the internet was up and kicking and well, but it was really hard to find the people that I needed to find to help support my recovery. And that's why I started this, to think about it differently and find a different way to go about it. So thank you for being here, and thanks for the work that you do.
Well, ditto. Thank you for the work that you're doing and giving so many people that have had strokes hope and more information about what they can do and what kind of alternatives might be out there. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show, and it's been great to be able to speak with all of your viewers and listeners, and hopefully we'll be able to do it again sometime.
Thanks again for joining us on today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and got something from it that you can use in your own life. Please comment, like, and share the episode. If you're watching on YouTube, give the show a thumbs up. Subscribe to the podcast and to the show on YouTube. Click the notifications tab to be notified of new episodes as they become live. And to help the podcast rank better, leave a comment. Let me know what you thought about the episode. If you're watching on YouTube, I love people leaving comments. I love responding. It really makes a huge difference to how the episode is broadcast out to other stroke survivors who are looking for this type of content. And hopefully it'll make a difference in their recovery and improve the way that they are going about healing from stroke. Thanks again for listening. I look forward to having a conversation with my next guest and bringing that to you for the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gasiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.